Hello, and welcome to the 187th episode of Gaming Talk. On this episode, I'm going to be discussing and giving my thoughts on Resident Evil 5. Let's get into it. This game is now the oldest Resident Evil game that I have both played and completed, so it's got that going for itself. The other thing it's got going for itself is managing to be so much better than Resident Evil 6, but that's not that hard to do. Now, I'm just going to get everything I don't like about this game out of the way first. The first and probably most obvious thing to critique negatively about this game is you can't shoot and move at the same time. But it doesn't end there, as you also can't move and reload at the same time either. It is quite the hindrance, especially when enemies can be as mobile as they want and you're just stuck shooting at them, repositioning, shooting, reloading, repositioning, and so on. It makes combat a little more annoying than it needs to be. Now, I'm sure some people will say it adds a layer of strategy or something like that to the game, but I don't think it does. This game released in 2009, a year that saw games like Left 4 Dead 2, Halo 3 ODST, Killzone 2, Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2, and so on. A lot of really great shooter games, so it feels like Capcom really had no excuse for these simple mechanics to not be in Resident Evil 5. Another thing that kind of goes with that is the fact that you just can't do one thing while doing another action, basically. Example is during the turret boss fight against the giant, when the game would tell me to press A and D to dodge, I would, but it wouldn't register because I still had the mouse button pressed down shooting the gun at the giant, and I would end up getting killed because the dodge wasn't registering. That means that you have to stop shooting, press A and D to dodge, and then go back to shooting. Now again, I'm sure some people are going to say that I'm nitpicking, but this is very annoying to have to deal with in the middle of a boss fight. The next thing has got to be inventory and the fact that you can't expand it. You get like 12 spots on both characters, and yes, if you play the game in single player, you are managing both inventories. But what am I supposed to do with 12 slots, especially when a lot of things don't stack, which is a frequently annoying thing in Resident Evil games. Why can't first aid sprays stack? Why do 3 of them have to take up 3 individual spaces? I just don't understand why the inventory space can't be upgraded. On Chris, I had a shotgun, a handgun, a SMG and or assault rifle, and a sniper rifle, and ammo for each of those. And that was basically his entire inventory gone. Sheva, she had the handgun, an SMG and or assault rifle, and any and all healing items, and maybe a grenade, and that was her inventory full, and I think that's stupid. Why didn't they use the upgradable case thing from Resident Evil 4 and bring that forward into this game? It's basically impossible to really carry anything more than that, and you can forget about picking up any weapons you just happen to find because you're not going to have the space to grab them unless you ditch something you already have. And that's another thing about the inventory, is that when you press the E key to open it, you can only discard things or move things from character to character. So if you find a shotgun you want to give to Sheva, you can't, because you can only exchange stuff from your partner's inventory to yours, and that's it. You could expand it in every game before this. You could do it in 2, and in 3, and in 4. So why not 5? Why did they take that away in Resident Evil 5? The next thing has to do with the fact that I do not like how there are certain enemies that can just kill you in one hit. First time I fought against a chainsaw guy, I guess I got too close, and they killed me in one hit. And then I tried again, and guess what? They did the same thing to Sheva. There are plenty of moments during the Giants boss fight that it can also kill you in one hit, and really all of the boss fights, and that isn't fair to the player. My next point is the tone of the game, because we went from sometimes horror and sometimes military shooter tone of Resident Evil 4 to just full-on military shooter tone here in this game, and I really wish this game had a more horror tone to it. This is Resident Evil, not Call of Duty. It's not Battlefield. It's supposed to be survival horror game first and foremost, not a shooter action game. And yes, it does bother me that Capcom made such a hard pivot in the Resident Evil franchise just to try to appeal to North American audiences who at the time were enjoying games like Halo and Call of Duty and Left 4 Dead 2 more, but that doesn't mean to change the core of one of your most popular franchises. Probably the only thing that I felt particularly neutral on is the progression of the enemies, which I liked that in Resident Evil 4. In this game, you have the basic enemies that only see small variation in the fact that there's one that sprouted something like a Plagas. Other than that, there's just exploding ones and ones that can shoot guns and rocket launchers. You have the bug creatures that sprouted from basic enemies. They don't change at all during the game. There's the big bat enemy that shows up twice in the game, and the chainsaw enemy that shows up twice in the game, and I don't see any change in them during the game either. I'm not counting Wesker because that's supposed to be a unique boss fight, and I'm not counting the giant after the on-rails turret section because that was just a one-off boss fight too. I'm just saying that compared to the way that the enemies progressed in Resident Evil 4, Resident Evil 5 didn't have all that much going on. Now moving on to things that I actually like about Resident Evil 5, and the first for me is the puzzles in this game were so much easier than the ones in Resident Evil 4. Again, this is just a personal thing because I'm not all that into puzzles in any capacity. What I thought was interesting is that the beginning of the game is basically just action and shooting. Then you hit these ruins where the game goes pretty much completely puzzles for a little bit with a little bit of action shooting. And then once you get out of the ruin, we go back to action shooting. But again, the puzzles were easier and I was able to solve them easily without having to look at any guides or anything. The next is definitely something to be praised coming off of playing Resident Evil 4 Remake is that Sheva is a godsend of a partner because she can actually do useful stuff. Yes, I am putting Ashley down again, but Ashley deserves it. The last thing for me is that this game was a lot less frustrating than both RE4 and RE6 were for me. Yes, I had very frustrating experiences playing both of those games, but this game was really not that frustrating at all, despite having those glaring basic mechanical issues. Overall, I really did enjoy my time playing Resident Evil 5, and I'm sure that is a surprise given how many negatives I had about the game. Resident Evil 5 is a good and enjoyable game that I can definitely recommend should be played by others. That's gonna do it for this episode, so if you like this kind of content, feel free to subscribe. Thank you for listening, and goodbye.